Good morning, everybody. Gonna wait for everybody to get connected. It's happening. So happy to see you this morning. Yes. So let's start with meditation. Take a deep breath down below your belly button. And let's just do a few few ohms to get started. So my voice hasn't spoken very much yet today, so it's probably going to be a little low. So bear with me and pick whichever pitch works for you. Let's do 9 of them just to get really centered. Now just feel for the energy in each of your energy centers called chakras as they open for you. Gently, gently holding your awareness in the spiritual body. Allow your eyes to open. While you're still completely engaged in that which is our true nature. We welcome your questions. Well, so glad to be with you today. We missed you last week. We had other important things to do. We were at a homeopathic, we could call it a reunion of sorts with our colleagues and studying further, learning new things so that we can be more helpful with the people in our lives. So that happened. It was quite wonderful, but it's nice to be back. And we want to let you know that next week there is an astrology conference that we'll be attending. So we're going to miss then. Then we're back for real for a significant number of weeks, we hope. So nice to be with you. How may we serve today? So we're still speaking in plural because it's always the self-referential words that we have trouble with. Rebecca has come to acknowledge within herself that she was really psychic as a child, and her parents and the other adults around her were quite horrified by the things she would say. And so they accused her of lying and making up stories over and over. And so she got very confused about what in fact reality was, even though she didn't have the language or the intellect to express that confusion in the face of adults' horror. So she basically set up walls between that psychic part of herself and the part that needed to function in their reality. And so as it began to come back, as her meditations got deeper and deeper, allowing for the emergence of this informational side, of course, it was perceived as other as it began to come in to her awareness. And so now that is more fully present, we'll say, the access to that part of herself, the awareness is arising that there is no separation. There never was. It's a pseudo-separation that was imposed on that part of her beingness. And it's possible that that's true for all of us, that we came in completely connected to ultimate reality, and the forces around us convinced us to pay attention only to their version of reality for our survival. And so we all have created a split like this in ourselves. And it's probably different in each of us and the same in each of us, how it was created and is beginning to re-manifest. Because how could it be true for one person and not for everybody? Because we're really essentially spiritual beings having a physical experience. And that disconnect is called the great forgetting. And we all have it to a greater and lesser extent. And what we're doing in our meditation practice is reconnecting to that awareness of ourselves as essentially spiritual beings. And once we have that awareness, all fear of death disappears. Not the physical. The physical doesn't really disappear, but the physical fear can become less and less as we understand ourselves to be spirit, and we're essentially returning to our true nature. As we die, we are becoming that which we have always been, and in that eternal truth, there is no other to fear, because there is no other. All the other is a figment of our imagination that has been handed to us as a matrix of belief. It doesn't mean that there is no impact to our physical bodies. Our physical bodies are made of the earth, and so we experience them as our primary reality. But when we understand that everything physical is a secondary reality, that it is also based in spirit. Everything that is alive is based in spirit. So when we understand life to be that, and we take a deep breath and connect to that, our internal awareness expands to give us a different answer than what our external awareness would routinely give us. And so when we take the time in any decision-making process to connect to the deepest part of ourselves and ask what is in the highest, best interest for the whole, then we are establishing a current of oneness inside ourselves that is our authentic connection to divine reality. And in divine reality, there is no other. Contrast exists between the external reality and the internal reality to give us feedback. And when we perceive that feedback, that contrast, as an opportunity to go deeper in ourselves, to discover that all opposites are created by belief system. For example, with limited love, there is going to be hate in opposition. With unconditional love, all parts are welcome. Love and hate are polar opposites, but they are both allowed in unconditional love and understood to be as fundamentally unconditional love, allowing for these polar opposites to exist. And being in the center, allowing both, is equanimity. And that's true of all contrast. And you see, from that perspective, life and death become contrast. And spirit is in the center. Equanimity and a certain kind of equilibrium. We could say that equanimity is spiritual equilibrium. We welcome questions. Doesn't have to be about this, it can be about anything. So we would say the true solution is to cultivate joy within yourself and your environment, to laugh as much as possible. Everybody experiences pain and loss. But if we can meet that with joy, understanding that, yes, we experience pain and loss, but we don't have to suffer. We get to choose. And it doesn't mean that we don't experience the pain and loss. We do. Every human being does. But we don't have to make it the theme, even though it's a recurring theme for all of us. It doesn't have to be the underlying theme of how we greet our life. We can choose differently. What is it the Buddha said? Anger is poison that we drink ourselves and expect the other person to fall over dead. What we experience and allow inside ourselves is our own experience. Our hatred of circumstances or other people only hurts us. Doesn't hurt them. They don't even know about it most of the time. So we have a responsibility to ourselves to have a happy life. And a happy life is not determined by how much money we have. We are all fortunate enough to have a roof over our head and plenty of food and warmth. And even the ability to stay cool when it's hot outside. We are extremely fortunate in the material world to have that. And at this stage of our lives, most of us have some time, extra time to spend cultivating a deep relationship with the depth of ourselves so that we become an integrated whole in our spiritual perception of the physical. And we discover that our system has built into it a capacity to reset with every single breath that we take. Because in the space in between the in-breath and the out-breath, and in between the out-breath and the in-breath, there is a possibility for change. because stillness represents possibility. And as we release ourselves into that stillness between the breaths, we can access that which is real. It doesn't mean that we have to hold our breath. We allow our breath to be as it is, and we sink into that space. And suddenly our awareness just pops out. And we're in union without any effort. It's so simple. Not easy, but simple. The hard part is remembering. Taking the time and energy to experience this authenticity regularly in ourselves is like building a huge bank account of joy. Love, peace, whatever word you want to throw into that experience fits. And as you trust this experience more and more, it becomes more and more available. It's so interesting that human beings fear their own authenticity. But this connection is what makes us truly free. Because we're no longer dependent on any other opinion. We have discovered our own source of nourishment. And the more we return to it, the more available it becomes to us. It's not something that we gain and lose. Although it does feel like that in the beginning, but it's always there. And spiritual maturity is abiding in that awareness. And for a long time in our practice, we run in and out of the room. It's just the nature of being human. And it's quite possible that we do that our whole lives. I can't tell you because I still do it. I think I know I have met people who maybe don't run in and out of the room, but I'm not entirely sure. It may be that that's the human condition. But it may also be that there are, ascended masters like the Dalai Lama. It may be that he doesn't run in and out of the room. And it's possible he was born that way. But it's not really about judgment. It's about cultivating ourselves. And cultivating that authenticity in ourselves every single day. And of course, we aim for mastery. But one of the main things we want you to understand is that punishing ourselves for lack of mastery never helps. And most of us learned to learn through punishment, reactive learning. So this is really about learning through cultivated experience and appreciating ourselves for making the attempt. And really loving ourselves for making a commitment to ever deepening authenticity. And so in very essential ways, as a friend of mine used to say, we ignore bad behavior and reward good behavior in ourselves. so that we aren't constantly shooting our efforts in the foot before we get off the ground. And this is a good way to approach any change we want to make inside ourselves. Usually we do the opposite. We berate ourselves for not being able to, 100% accommodate to a new rule we've made for ourselves. We still welcome questions. Anybody? Andrew? Brenda? And as we begin to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, we begin to have a little bit of room to give others the benefit of the doubt. I think that was a squirrel outside the window. That's pretty good for a 1-year-old puppy, though, to be that quiet for that long. We welcome questions. How may we serve? Yes.
Hi, it was very interesting when you said rewarding good behavior and ignoring bad behavior. I know that's simplified, but all I can manage to do is acknowledge good behavior. But the bad behavior has always seemed to require more attention. This is in myself and actually in others, but it would be so nice to be able to ignore the bad behavior and but I don't know how to reward the good behavior except by acknowledging it lightly.
Just appreciate it. Live in the good behavior and forget the bad behavior. What we're really saying is punishment doesn't work. Punishment just makes us feel bad. And feeling bad is the whole problem in the first place. We're drinking poison when we punish ourselves. Whoever changed because they feel worse? You have a choice to feel better. So just ignore it and reward the good in yourself.
By
Until
appreciating, right?
by appreciating,
appreciating it, yeah.
by feeling good about the moment that went well, instead of punishing ourselves for the moment that accompanied it that didn't go so well. That
Part
way,
of our matrix of belief in our family was about punishment. I mean,
yes,
there was a strong punishment element to our growing up.
yeah, I don't think there's anybody in this call who didn't have a strong element of punishment. That's why we're talking about it. Because punishment doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Did we really avoid things because we were going to get punished? No, all we did was lie about it. We still did what we wanted. It didn't change our behavior.
It actually did in my case. The punishment worked, but it also had an element of fear in it. You know, fear is a way to make somebody get in line, but it's not at all healthy.
No, it doesn't create a healthy relationship with the person who's inducing the fear. And they're, of course, behaving like that, inducing fear because that's the way they were treated and it's all they know. But, you know, there's a point where fear doesn't really work. And that's when you decide to face the fear and overcome it. And then you can choose for yourself because you're no longer afraid. Fear is a temporary solution that is imposed on us by people who want to control us. Once we see through that, then the fear disappears because we can no longer be controlled by fear once we understand it. I mean, yes, we learn not to run out in the street in front of a car, but not because of fear. It's just, it becomes common sense. Oh, we're not going to do that because we're going to get hurt. That's not exactly fear. That's common sense. It may start out as fear, when we're 5 years old and we want to play chicken with a car, you know, we don't really understand consequences. But a lot of what passes as fear begins as common sense. But when we decide that we don't want to live a life based in fear, and that happens at a certain point, then we challenge those fears to see what's real. And many of us were, you know, have been ingrained with fear. That's why we separate from our own authenticity. Fear and punishment, they kind of go together. And a lot of the reason we punish ourselves is because we're afraid that if we reward ourselves without the punishment, that we might completely lose control over our behavior. And then where would that lead? Where would that lead? We don't know because we never challenge our matrix of belief. It's possible that health comes from cultivating authenticity within ourselves and dropping the fear. And that in that authenticity, we actually see what's truly right for ourselves. We feel what's truly right for ourselves. We will never know until we stop punishing ourselves. And as the Beatles said, give peace a chance. We have the illusion that if we make a mistake and we don't punish ourselves, that we'll continue to repeat that mistake. We're not stupid. That would be true if we didn't have a mind. But we have a conscious mind. We can choose to behave differently without punishing ourselves. Say, oh, that really didn't work. You know, it's like figuring out a maze. That didn't exactly work. I'm going to try to do that a little differently next time. That's not punishment. That is using your mind to good effect. Punishment is using your emotions to bury yourself from being able to use your mind to actually make a better decision. And so we end up repeating the same pattern over and over of failure and punishment, failure, punishment, failure, punishment, until there's nothing left. We're like this little contracted thing that we can't learn. But if we actually take our failures as learning experience rather than, or as experience to be learned from, rather than opportunities to punish ourselves even more, ever more deeply, causing an ever greater separation between our authenticity and our awareness. And so, you know, we could talk about it in the Western way of separating emotion and mind as though they are separate. They're not. But if we pretend for a moment that they're separate, and we consider the fear and control and punishment as emotional mind, and the ability to actually examine the situation as an adult and begin to treat ourselves in a different way with all reward and no punishment, then our mind suddenly pops into availability in these situations. And we can think, oh, there might be a different way to do that, instead of repeating the pattern of pain and reaction and anger and all those, that conglomeration of our past taking over our present. So instead we try something new. Reward good behavior and ignore bad. And see what happens. It's an experiment to see if that's a path to cultivating greater access to authenticity, instead of shutting ourselves down every time we disappoint ourselves. You see how that creates barriers, internal barriers to access of our deepest self. And when we understand that our authenticity actually knows what is healthy for us, because there's no separation between health and authenticity. Now, that doesn't mean that our bodies are going to last forever if we do this. That's not what we mean by health. When we talk about health, we're talking about range of motion in the physical world. And that given the state of our being in a given moment, we have access to the greatest physical range of motion that's possible for our bodies, the greatest emotional range of motion that's possible for our emotional system, the greatest intellectual range of motion that's possible for our intellect, and the greatest spiritual flexibility that's possible that meets our cultivation. And so health is about being able to live our lives well. You'll notice that our quote unquote healthcare system doesn't even have a definition for health, except the absence of dis-ease. And what is that? But authenticity. But they don't know what authenticity is. It's like they play shuffleboard with a bunch of pseudo medicines that were never seen on the planet before 1950. Chemicals that have nothing to do with what actually exists on the earth. They're imitations, because whatever exists on the earth cannot be patented. So even though natural medicine exists for the human body, it is completely discounted because it cannot be commercialized. So that's an interesting dilemma we've created for ourselves as a species. We have actually transformed ourselves into a different species of human than anything that existed before 1950 and pharmaceutical progress, in quotes. And that is continuing as we begin to mess with the human genome in our vaccines. It's not that these things are good or bad. They are just different. They're creating different human beings. And so we neither condemn or exalt over this. We just acknowledge that it's happening, and people are now very different, and they will continue to change for a long time based on these environmental changes. And this is, not to mention the toxicity that we've created in the process of using our world in a way as if the resources are infinite. And in a physical dimension, resources are not infinite, just as our lives are not infinite. So there's a lot of confusion in the physical realm. In our authentic beingness, the confusion disappears. So we can get all kerfuffled by looking at all the things we just said, and then we just come back to the breath. And release ourselves into that space. Release our awareness into that space. And the breath is our access point in the space in between. So we could say accessing that authenticity is how we reward ourselves. By becoming more and more authentic. There is no denial of reality in authenticity, the opposite. And we trust ourselves that that access to authenticity will teach us how to make better decisions about everything and how to stop the punishment. Questions?
I'm sorry. I would like it if you could clarify again what ignoring the bad behavior entails, because it sounded like you didn't, it's not about avoiding looking at bad behavior, what we call bad behavior. To me, it's just missing the mark in any given moment. But doesn't it require some attention? Not punishment, I got that, but attention and acknowledgement.
Yes. And that's what the work is.
That's
You
what I
know,
thought.
say, well, maybe I could have done this better. And then you think about how. But it's not in a punitive way. It's like, in some ways we took on these reactive feelings as very young children. So we allow ourselves to approach these experiences with the awe of a child. Oh, this didn't work so well. And then you open yourself to possibility. Well, what could I have done differently that might have made a change? And then it becomes a mental exercise rather than an emotional repression. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yes,
So would the same hold true for bad behavior in others that's affecting us?
absolutely. That way
Yeah.
we stop condemning all the people that we love. Because they're the people we notice the most. You know, we don't care if the neighbor across the street does something weird unless it affects us.
But in relationships, yeah, for close relationships, that's definitely true. But relationships
Yes,
like work relationships, for example.
work relationships become close relationships because they have impact on our beingness all the time.
Mhm.
So yes, and in a way, this maybe is what is meant by turning the other cheek. You don't fight exactly. You just get smarter. And you don't beat yourself up because then you're wounded. In addition to being wounded, you're double wounded because there's the external wound and then there's the internal wound on top of it. And so then, you're really at a deficit facing a situation that you would really like to change. So instead, you unpack the punishment, you allow yourself to stand up inside that circumstance, inside yourself, and you use your mind to think of a better way to behave next time. And all of these things, there's always a next time because we continue to attract the same thing until we master it. Have you noticed?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's learning. So life is learning. And when we can approach this learning with the awe of newness instead of the repetition of punishment and then a kind of numb boredom that sets in because we've been here before. If we accept the idea that we can change, truly, and we allow ourselves to rise up and think of a different solution.
And maybe that can allow the other who's behaving badly to change if you have to stay in a relationship with them.
Well, maybe that can happen because you've created a vacuum that allows them to not be punished by you. And maybe they'll just use that to try to control you more. That's possible. In which case, it's time to think about different relationships. Relationships all have cycles, especially the ones that we have a choice about. When we've karmically committed to another person, in marriage and family and familial relationships, those are different. We really try to live up to those and change ourselves to make the relationship better from our point of view. And so it may take a long time for a person to change as we stop punishing their bad behavior. It may take a really long time. But those are our deep personal relationships that and sometimes we can't remain committed to those because those people just create so much difficulty in our lives that we ourselves can't really grow anymore. And at that point, then we have to make a change. And fortunately, we live in a culture that allows that. Especially as women, we do have choices in our culture. Not all cultures allow that. And so we can be grateful that our field of learning is not so restricted. And the cultural punishment is pretty lenient. And we wish for a world where the culture is based in love and punishment is no longer necessary because everybody understands that love is what works. It's actually a very practical solution. Not one that has ever been tried in our lifetimes, truly. By enough people to really, really make a gravitational change toward love. But that doesn't keep us from changing ourselves. And as we change, every life that our life touches also is changed by us. The more we change our own matrix of belief and live from love, the more powerful love becomes in the environment. That's how it works. And so our touchstone is our breath. We bring ourselves back to spiritual awareness in cultivating that space between the breaths and allowing our spirit to expand into our awareness so that we are ever more living more deeply from that. And that's practice. We love your questions. Mm-hmm. Well, I was just thinking that it would be really nice, but I didn't do it. The mantra, one of the enlightened mantras, is one I think we did a few weeks ago. That Triambukam Ijamahe. But I neglected to write it out so that we could put it on so you could all sing it with us. But we would love to teach it because it's really a mantra, a very uplifting mantra to say when you're bringing yourself into or out of meditation. So we'll say it for a while now as we meditate. We'll really sing it. Andrew's not here, so we'll do solo performance day. But you're welcome to join, and especially just feel the feeling of this mantra. It's a way to reset yourself quite dramatically. So we'll say it for a while. I don't know if we'll say it for the entire time, but when we get quiet, we're still going to meditate for a while. And as always, we totally love being with you. Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vartanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambukam yijamahe sugandim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityur mukshivam amritata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vartanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vartanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vartanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Om Triambakam Ijamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata Om Triambakam Ijamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhana Mrityur Mukshivamamrutata. Thank you so much. We have experienced total joy in being with you this morning. Completely wonderful. Thank you so much. Bye for now. Two weeks. Okay, see you then.